Let's talk about our hopes and dreams beyond the reach it seems. Let's talk. Confess I live in hell. I failed to fall in scheme. Maybe we can find a pathway forward or a clue. So we may together be a symbiotic harmony where I can talk to you, you can talk to me. Let's talk. Let's talk. Let's talk, let's talk, let's talk.
Welcome to the Talk Vermont. My name is Reverend Arnold Thomas, and I am pleased that you have joined us. Today's session deals with the Declaration of Inclusion in a time of division and exclusion. This declaration that has been really promoted by several individuals, and we have two of them here with us. They are Al Wakefield and Norman Cohen, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves. But before I do that, let me first say the reason why this program is called the Talk Vermont. When African American families refer to the talk, they usually are referring to important conversations they have with their children or loved ones to help them survive in a racially toxic environment, often as they confront police officers. So that's why we call this program the Talk. It's a talk that is not only deals with that particular important conversation, but other important topics that are necessary for people of color to survive in an environment in which they are not part of the majority. And it's also an effort on the part of families to expand the conversation, to include important topics of conversation that every person, regardless of race, regardless of sexual orientation, regardless of whatever experience of marginalization they have, to have important conversations that will allow them to relate and survive in an environment that hopefully by such conversations will become more inclusive. So once again, we are glad to have Alvin Wakefield and Norman Cohen to talk about the Declaration of Inclusion, especially in a time of division and exclusion. I'm going to have them introduce themselves. Let's start with you, Norm, and then go to Al.
Thank you very much for inviting us. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Norman Cohen. I live in Rutland, Vermont. I've been here since 1969. I came from Washington, D.C. I was 27 years old. I got a job in the Office of the United States Attorney here in Rutland, which at that point in time had the United States Attorney and one assistant. The office is now in Burlington, and there's a United States Attorney and 22 or 24 assistants. And it's not to say that I did the work of 22 or 24, but it has grown. Things have gotten more complicated, and it's met the challenges that way. As I said, I was born in D.C., and I came here in 1969, didn't know anybody. I checked into a hotel and began looking for a place to live, began my career, and I think I was here about 3 months and knew I'd never leave, and I've been fortunate enough to stay. I practiced law until 2019 when I retired, mostly in my own office with one partner. My leisure time is mainly biking and walking and working out in the gym. I'm a single fellow. I have two daughters. One lives in Park City, Utah. One lives here. I think, as Al might have mentioned in our brief private discussion. My creativity stems around the writing to the extent that I have any creativity. Um, and I do write letters to the editor and occasional commentary for the Rutland Herald.
Great.
So anything else you'll want to know about me, you'll have to ask.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that, Norm.
Well,
How
thank
about
you.
you, Al?
So I'll furnish whatever additional on Norm. But uh, Al
Can you
Wakefield,
mute him?
I'm sorry.
I said, can he mute you?
We're, 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 uh, yeah, I've lived in Vermont now over 40 years or so. Born in Harlem, New York, grew up in Columbia, South Carolina through high school and then on to Syracuse, NYU, and then flew planes in the Air Force. Went into corporate life for 20 something years, was successful in becoming an officer with a major Fortune 200 company at the time. And then on into the world of executive search, recruiting very senior level people around the world on a retainer basis. I moved up here in the middle of that search career and opened up the Vermont office of Wakefield Global International and did that for some 15 years or so. I have to add, though, that my move up here after being a weekender for some 20 something years or so was to take over a Black-owned restaurant and gourmet food market, which I owned for 2 years or so. Realized that I was in over my head and came back into something that I knew how to do. But I have the experience of being a local entrepreneur on a local economic basis and being an entrepreneur on an international basis, one much more successful than the other.
Great.
I'm not married, not married at this point, but I have two kids. A daughter lives in Brooklyn and a son who lives in Essex Junction, and I have three grandchildren. And I play tennis a lot. And Norm said I was a musician earlier. I'm not a musician. I wouldn't pretend to be one, but I love learning music. And so I'm studying with several people, both on the jazz and classical side, and reading a lot that I've got the time to do now that I'm no longer running around the world.
Great. Great. And I think I actually had a meal at that restaurant that you owned briefly in Rutland, and had a wonderful time getting better acquainted with you at the same time. So let's talk about the Declaration of Inclusion. And as I mentioned, it seems to be appropriate and definitely needed. We have a presidential administration that seems to have gone the other way as far as dividing and excluding folk. I think he's even out to get Sesame Street. So we're wondering why the need for a Declaration of Inclusion? How did it come about, and why Vermont?
Well, let me start, and then Norm can pick it up. Let me read the Declaration of Inclusion first of all. Mm-hmm. This is what we've shared with over 200 towns or so to date, and it reads as follows: the town of blank, put your town in it, mm-hmm. condemns racism and welcomes all persons, regardless of race, color, religion, national origin, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, age, disability, of socioeconomic status, and wants everyone to feel safe and welcomed in our community. As a town, we formally condemn all discrimination in all of its forms, commit to fair and equal treatment of everyone in our community, and strives to ensure that all of our actions, policies, and operating procedures reflect this commitment. The town of blank has and will continue to be a place where individuals can live freely and express their opinions. And then this document is typically signed by a member of the select board or a member of town management, Arnold. Vermont is a wonderful place. Both Norm and I moved up here because we wanted to be here. Norm had a job here. I was buying a business, but we both could have stayed someplace else. And and hopefully continue to be successful there. We came to Vermont because we'd spent some time here. Certainly I had weekends with my family for, 15 years or so, and finally got the guts to give up everything that I had been reasonably successful doing in New York City and moved to Vermont. And at no point have I regretted that move. Vermont has been green for me in every perspective, from every perspective. I love it here. Wouldn't want to be any other place, and I can probably do that within certain limits as such. But Vermont is an all-white state, and it being black here, you come to feel your blackness here perhaps more intensely than you might in New York City or some other larger town across the country. And so you recognize that. I come from a point of sensitivity to that, but also looking at what's happened on a national basis where blacks and other races and other genders and ethnicities are being discriminated against. We felt there was an opportunity to make Vermont a place better than, in fact, it already is. And we looked at it from a moral standpoint, what with the killing of George Floyd, but we also looked at it from an economic standpoint. That Vermont is small, it's not growing. Our youth are leaving. We're not recruiting enough people. The economic base is not growing at the rate that it should in order to be a prosperous and growth-oriented state. And so, from those several different perspectives, the Declaration of Inclusion, when it was brought to me, seemed like something that we ought to pursue.
Thank you. Norm, would you like to add to that?
Oh, just a few words. It has a bit of a different, my background to it, approach to it is differently. First of all, I came from a family in D.C. where my father was from Norfolk, Virginia. My mother was from D.C. They weren't particularly liberal, tuned into the issues of the time. My seventh grade year which was junior high school then, 7, 8, and 9 in D.C., was the first year of integration, right after Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka. And I went to school the first day, and there was a demonstration outside, which I later learned included George Lincoln Rockwell as a very young man. And they were singing or chanting, "We want freedom, send them back to Africa." So I went into school and I came home and I said to my father, what do I do? I told him what was going on. He said, you go to school. He says, you don't want to be like me. I dropped out of school in the 7th grade and I have regretted it ever since. And, I come from a segregated area in Norfolk, Virginia. That's yesterday. You have to go to school. So I did. Recently, and I share all of Al's views. I mean, I've just seen it too often. I haven't experienced outward discrimination, outward racism, but you just know it's there. And as a Jewish person, I have not felt any degree of anti-Semitism, although people have expressed how it has been silently perhaps imposed. I'm just not aware of it. But something happened 2 weeks ago that made me aware of really why, or reminded me emphatically, why I'm involved in this. And the Rutland City Board of Aldermen was considering a resolution on fairness and equality. And by the way, they were one of the first 20 towns, I think, to adopt the Declaration of Inclusion. And I spoke there in support of it. And the meeting opened with a pledge of allegiance to the flag. And I said to the alderman, the Board of Aldermen, have you, as individuals of the board, lived up, and has the city of Rutland, lived up to the last half a dozen words of that Pledge of Allegiance, one nation under God, with liberty and justice for all. If we haven't, then it's important to adopt this resolution and make it public of your commitment. And I came home and thought about that because it was pretty much off the cuff. And it just spoke the world to me. And I think we have that obligation. That's what that's what this country is about. And we haven't met it. Has progress been made? Yes. Is it enough? No. Is there still a long way to go? Yes. And that's why I'm involved.
Thank you, Norm. Thank you both. So what has been the response? By the way, how many towns have you presented this declaration to, and what has been the response to it?
I'll take the first part of that. We'll use 247 as a number of target towns that we'd love to have adopt the Declaration of Inclusion and implement what we suggest. Of the 247, we've probably made presentations to somewhere around 200 or so. But we've got 161 that have actually adopted the declaration as we have recommended it. Some towns have done slight variations on what we recommended that I read to you earlier, but in each instance, it's been an attempt to improve, enhance the declaration, and enhance the intent of the declaration as we've presented it. We've got one town, in fact, as of today, Wyndham, that has adopted it, and we don't officially register it on our website until we've got the declaration in hand, the signed declaration. But the town of Wyndham adopted today. We're looking forward to saying we've got 162. There's some 6 or 7 other towns, Arnold, that have adopted declarations, but they didn't conform to what we asked them to say and to do. The spirit and intent from our perspective was not maintained, and so we didn't list them. But we did include a category which says essentially that they are in support of a declaration of inclusion and have developed their own. Mm-hmm. There are probably I don't know, Norm, maybe 15 towns that either have not adopted or voted to not adopt, or still thinking about it, maybe a little bit more than that at this point. But one last comment, that those 161 towns, or now 162, represent about 80% of Vermont's population. So we've got 4/5 or whatever that mathematically comes out to of towns covered by the Vermont Declaration of Inclusion.
That's great. Yep. Wonderful. Norm.
Yeah. Well, it's not much I can add to what Al said. It's certainly been an incredible experience, and we've worked. Every town is different. I think if we've learned anything, every single municipality is different in how they proceed on it, and that kind of thing. And it's just, you almost can't describe it.
Yeah. I think just to add on, I think we're going to talk about what obstacles we run into in towns as such, and by and large it's been a really positive experience. Obviously, as Norm said, each town is different, and some towns go all the way from this is really the greatest thing we've been waiting on, something like this. We need to carry this forth in our town to. We don't need this here. You're introducing problems that we don't have in this town, and we don't know who you are and what your motives are, and you're probably a part of some movement. You're probably being paid to do this. All kinds of things like that. So we've run into those, and we've tried to answer those. And in fact, parenthetically, there's an FAQ page on our website, vtdeclarationofinclusion.org, which addresses some 10 questions such as that we typically get. And those questions are typically oriented towards not moving to adopt the declaration, as opposed to, we're looking to do this, and we just have this burning question we just have to ask you.
So there are levels of enthusiastic acceptance, there is moderate reception to the declaration, and then there's outright resistance. How
Yep.
can you share some of the positives, some of the very favorable, and some of the most resistant encounters that you've had?
Yes, I'm going to be a little guarded if I may, but I can tell you two stories that stand out in my mind. Um, One town that I approached, and Al was with me, and we usually approach most towns. We don't appear personally; we appear by Zoom. The ones in Rutland County are very nearby. We are able to go to if invited. But one town we were doing by Zoom, and we go through our routine, and we all have almost prepared statements, or they've become that way as we've gotten more experience in this. And we started talking to the town, and the chair of the select board just cut me off right away and said, "It's not necessary. We're going to sign it." And that was that. And it was, I don't remember where it was, what town it was, but it was certainly a wonderful experience. On the other hand, the resistance, as Al described, comes in various shapes and forms and language. But we had one recently in where we got there to make our presentation, Bob Harnish and I, and it was too late to get it on the ballot. It was a small town, and the select board decided to take a survey and ask one question on the survey: should the town of X adopt the Vermont Declaration of Inclusion? And may have spelled it out. I didn't see it. It came back, as I understand it, 4-1 almost in favor of the adopting the Vermont Declaration of Inclusion. And the select board unanimously voted against it.
Oh,
And those are the two extremes. We've had all sorts of things in between. We've had towns say, "We'll take it up later," never get to it. We have towns say that um, we'll take it up later and have done it, and we're still waiting on others. So it's, as we've said, and I'm sure we'll say again, every town is different. Every town is individualistic, and we just try to be as forthright and polite and informative as we can, and keep our fingers crossed.
yeah.
Town that Norm mentioned earlier that said, "Boy, we've been looking for this. We're ready to do it." I had a similar town where they just said, "We're ready to do it." And I must admit that when we came off Zoom, I was a little bit disappointed. And for this reason, I guess I felt, and this is something to do with me, I guess, hopefully not anything to do with the town. I felt like they had not really thought seriously about the declaration and what it meant. And that was then, not taking into consideration they'd done what we asked towns to do, which is to read through the declaration, go to the website, come to us with questions before the meeting, so that at the meeting it becomes almost a fait accompli. I didn't give them credit for that, but I got off and said, I wonder whether they really thought about what they've agreed to. So you kind of run from that perspective to one, in fact, was with Norm, where we were actually invited outside, and I won't name the town, but we were invited outside for a little dookie, because we had said something which the people in this meeting did not like. And I pushed Norm ahead, and because he's my bodyguard, and we walked out. And fortunately, the select board pulled this little fellow back into the meeting. So, we've we've fought the fight in various various kinds of ways. In most instances, the select board itself has moved to adopt, but in some 6 or 7, I may have maybe off a little bit on Norm on the numbers, but some 6 or 7, let's say, towns have gone to a town vote. The select board did not feel for whatever reason, that it wanted to take up the declaration. And I guess I can postulate as what some of those reasons are, but I won't. That having been said, in all but one of those instances, the towns have voted to adopt, and overwhelmingly. Uh, and the town that voted not to adopt was a very, very small town of 60, 70 people or so. And the vote, I think, was 33 to adopt and 39 not to adopt. And we're hopeful that, we're going back after some of those towns that have not adopted or voted to not adopt in a strategic kind of way when the select board may have changed, the environment may be different, even the political environment on a macro sense, or in a macro sense may have changed as such. So we run into just a number of different kinds of circumstances. It's been interesting, very interesting.
Well, you've certainly encountered the good, the bad, and the ugly in all of this.
Yes.
And I applaud your efforts. I'm also wondering, it's interesting because I guess the largest community you may have presented this to was, have you presented it to Burlington?
Yes.
So the
Yes.
town council of Burlington has affirmed, and some of the small towns, because the declaration really covers a lot of territory as far as inclusion of marginalized groups, and I'm wondering to what extent, especially small towns where people may know or assume to know everyone else, feel that it doesn't include them or that it's not applicable to them. Is that one of the reasons why they just feel that it has nothing as far as they're concerned, it has no application, or what? I'm just wondering what, especially among the small towns.
Well, smaller towns are small in many instances because they want to be that way, right? Economic circumstances may lead to that, but a lot of towns they're small and they like to stay that way, and they have not. Their feeling is that this is a world that's different from theirs, and they don't want to be like those worlds. And quite honestly, within Vermont, a lot of folks say we don't want to be Burlington. And we may know what that means in some kind of ways, but most of us know what that means in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And so we respect that. And as you've just indicated, Arnold, we've got aunts, uncles, cousins, and close relatives and dear friends who, in a town of 60, 70 people, are very, very close, and nobody wants to tick anybody else off. And so they would just like to stay away from that. That's not our world. We don't need it here. We're fine. We'll people come here and we'll accept them. We'll take it person by person and individual circumstance by individual circumstance.
No,
it's a very complex question, situation, Reverend. I have run into the fact that we don't need this. I approached the select board chair personally. The town clerk didn't want to put it on the agenda, didn't want to talk to him about it. So I spoke with them, again, in a small town, and just felt they didn't need it. And that conversation took place about a year ago, maybe a little more. And ever since then, I have just wondered if I handled it correctly. I may have backed off too quickly. I think, hidden behind the quote rejection or not adoption or hesitation is our fact that we're not making things. We haven't made it. Or I haven't made things as clear. But we're not accusing a town when we go to them of being a racial town, a racist town. What we're asking, because we don't know, and we assume Vermonters are good people, and they are. And what we're suggesting is that we promote that you promote that you are open, that you are welcoming, and that you want to grow, and you want to be fair to all people. And that's something I've used and include in all my remarks now that we're not all my opening remarks that we're not accusing you of anything. And I think there is, for whatever reasons, sort of a implicit resistance to change.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not it's not anything but that. It's more that and so that's one thing. Um, and the other thing Al touched on earlier was, well, you're an outside group, that you're a lobbyist or bop bop bop. And so I try and make a point uh, to tell people, and this is the absolute truth. Uh, we we have no checkbook. We haven't donated any money of our own to the effort. Um, we don't accept donations and we don't solicit donations. It is an entirely volunteer effort by initially four of us or three of us uh, uh, of people who just love the state they've adopted and that has adopted them and been good to them and their families. And uh, I think hopefully we get that across. And we've certainly had more wins than losses,
Mm-hmm.
thankfully. And the uh, that's how we're trying to approach it. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, but it's speculation. We don't know what the resistance is based on, and they don't tell us.
Yeah, yeah. You
Harnish
mentioned.
is, I'm sorry, I was going to say that Bob Harnish is the person too, excuse me, who initially brought it to us. And unfortunately, Bob is, well, not unfortunately, he's bicycling with his lady friend through southern Italy now.
Ah,
And you have to understand that Bob is like 87 years of age.
wonderful.
And yeah, and I'm fearful for him. I can't wait to get him back here, quite honestly, safely. But Bob is 87. Norm is, how old are you, Norm? 81,
I'll be
82?
83 in June.
Yeah, so he's the kid. I'm almost 87 years of age. So the
Ah,
three of us are really old guys, right? And we're joined by another attorney, Patty Lancaster, and Patty's probably early 70s. Barbara Pulling, who is with the regional planning group here in Rutland, is in her 60s, I'm sure. Marcia Cassell, who's a former teacher, is, I'm sure, in her 60s.
mm-hmm.
And Karima Edwards is probably the kid in the group, and my guess is Karima is in her early 50s or so. So, we're not kids. This is passion for us.
Yeah,
Our vision, as is stated on the website, is that Vermont will become known as, and in fact be, the most inclusive state in this country. And if numbers count, we may be, because we've declared ourselves so, having 161 towns, having said, yeah,
yeah.
we include people. So we probably are. Now, attitudinally and in terms of day to day, workings, that may be very different. We're not naive, but we're on our way. We're on our way. I think that vision is a worthy vision, and we'll spend a lifetime reaching towards that. It may never be attained, but that's what we're looking at.
I'd
That's.
just like to mention one thing.
Go ahead.
Barbara does work for the Rutland Regional Planning Commission, and parenthetically, she's also chair of the Rutland Town Planning Commission, and I've served on that with her for 7 or 8 years, and she just never runs out of energy. Um, the uh, 161 towns is, as Al said, 79%, and there was something else he said I wanted to comment, but it slipped away. If it comes to me, I'll fill in later.
That's what I meant about the over 80 deal.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're definitely baby boomers, and I can relate
We
to
have
that since I'm
we have
one
these
myself.
moments from time to time.
Ah,
Yeah.
I'm also wondering what have you yourselves learned from this experience? How have you changed as a result of this effort to try and promote the Declaration of Inclusion?
I'll go first, Norm. None of us are free of prejudice. I don't think. I mean, I feel pretty safe in saying that we all have prejudice of some kind or other. We're biased in one way or another because of a variety of things, you know, whether it be race, ethnicity, gender, but it can also be height. It can also be, you know, weight.
Careful,
It can be.
careful.
Okay, tall man. You know, it can be a variety of things, and I'm probably just as guilty of that as anybody. And so, constantly fighting to be open-minded and to accept people on their own, not to make judgments. And I'll give you an example, and then come back to the question you asked. Norm mentioned, and I also mentioned that I'm studying music. So I was at a camp run by the Vermont Jazz Center, and I was staying in this kind of okay motel down in Putney. And I came out in the morning, and there was this white guy with this beard in coveralls, and he was sitting there with a couple of cans about 2 doors down. And I looked at him, and I made a quick judgment that this is not a guy, being in Vermont, that probably likes me, and I think I should probably, you know, be on guard against him. And so I said, because I say hello to everybody, I said, "Hey, how you doing?" And he said, "Oh, fine. How about you? I hope you're going to have a great day. What are you doing today?" And I said, "Well, I'm off to music camp. I'm studying music." He said, "Well, that's really one." He said, I do play music myself. In fact, I'm a member of a symphony orchestra, and
Wow.
I'm just here from the western part of the country." And I went, "Oh, God." You know?
Oh my.
Stereotypes,
Yep.
stereotypes. I still don't know what he had in those cans, though. But you know, it's I've learned that I need to continue to fight against the biases that for whatever reason, because of my background, etc., exist. And when I go to a town, when we go to a town, to go there with a very, very open mind. We were in one town about a year ago where it was obvious to me, because of the way he expressed himself, that he was feminine in some kind of way. And there was another person who came in who actually came in with a cane. And that town voted against the Declaration of Inclusion. What did I learn? Once again, don't think in stereotypes. There's every reason in the world, and I still believe that I must not have presented it right, because there's no way in hell those folks should not have adopted the Declaration of Inclusion, but they didn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's just the way it is. So if I've learned anything, it's just reinforced the fact that I need to keep an open mind, and make myself vulnerable as I travel around. I studied karate for a number of years, so I can defend myself even at 87 years of age. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Al.
Yeah.
Norm, would you like to add to that?
Well, there's not much I can say. I
say
have,
that, and then you talk long.
be careful. I just have to keep him in line. You know, it's it wears me out. Anyway, I think that the implicit bias thing is what I've learned about myself, and learned to be aware of it and not as embarrassed about it as I was at the beginning of this journey, and try to deal with it as it surfaces. You know, it's something that's built in, excuse me, and it's very difficult to get rid of it from the white side, from the black side, from the Asian side. Everybody, everybody's got their share, and everybody has got to deal with it. And I think frankly, Al has taught me that, and taught me to be aware of it, and not necessarily to be embarrassed about it if I'm working on it. And that's been a very valuable lesson.
Thank you. Well, I'm also intrigued that you, Norm, grew up in a Jewish household, and
Yes.
and you, Al, and certainly a Southern black household. To what extent Has Vermont been either a challenging place or a place of refuge for you to inspire your efforts behind the Declaration of Independence, of Inclusion? I'm sorry.
Um, as I said, I have not. Vermont's been wonderful. My children were not exposed to any anti-Semitism. I give, to some degree, I give my uh, late ex-wife credit for that. She came from a tiny rural town in Alabama, 750 people, um, and went went through the University of Alabama, graduate degree in speech pathology, and she made a point of going to elementary school, both children when they were in elementary school, every um, every December when Hanukkah and Christmas came up, to make children aware, informed. And I think that had a lot to do with my children's experiences. They never reported any anti-Semitism to me. So um, I did not experience difficulty. Did people not come to me as an attorney because I was Jewish? Um, Perhaps, but I'm not aware of it. Uh, but I wouldn't doubt it either. So I was never faced with that. I was never faced with it by any other of my professional colleagues, certainly no judges. So, but I do understand how if you're a person of color in Vermont, the going is tougher. And I just want to make sure that if I leave any legacy, it's that I open the door a half an inch to make things a little smoother.
Thank you, Norm. Al, you mentioned that
Sorry,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Go ahead.
Having been born in 1938 and gone into the Air Force in 1960 or so, and flying planes, for 3 or 4 years or so, one of the few black flyers at the time. But I was in Columbia, South Carolina in 1954 when the desegregation decision came from the Supreme Court, and in a black school, and everybody there thought both joyfully as well as fearfully that our school is going to be shut down, and we're going to end up in Dreher High School, which was the white school in Columbia, South Carolina. But while I was in the military, I came through Selma, Alabama, the week after Martin Luther King marched from Montgomery from Selma to Montgomery, came across the Pettus Avenue Bridge, and without a lot of elaboration, was shot at and stoned, and theoretically run out of town. I didn't run, but I was driving a Corvette, so I didn't have to run very fast anyway. But chased out of town, ended up in Air Force Base outside of town, seeking refuge with my wife. There are a number of incidences that I can cite, very similarly. That's the only one where I knew my life was in danger. But in Vermont, experienced relatively little overt bigotry. Was in Home Depot the day after this last election, and had just come out of the aisle, in one of the side aisles into the main aisle, and I heard this voice go, "It's because of you goddamn people we got all these problems in this country." And I looked around and I saw this white guy disappear. And I stood there for a moment and I looked around to see who those people might be, and determined that among those people I might be one, even though I could not specifically say it was me. And I waited and I walked down to the end of the aisle because I didn't want to be in a position of having to confront him in any kind of way. And he's gone. And I never saw him again. I walked around the store just kind of looking to buy things and whatever. Never saw him again. And quite honestly, to this day, don't know whether he was screaming at me or whether he was screaming, because I had just appeared immediately in the aisle, and almost as if there were a script, he said what he said. So, I have my doubts as to whether he was screaming at me or not, and it almost doesn't matter who I was screaming at. Certainly, that was not a nice thing, not a nice thing to do.
Yeah.
And another incident, and I'll be quiet about this. I was driving down in Rutland towards Route 7, and I pulled over into another lane, and this guy evidently got angered by the fact that I had pulled over in front of him. I guess I might have been driving my New York way, and he got out of his car and shouted on the far lane and shouted, epithets to me. And the light changed, and I slowly drove off. But I didn't hear anything I haven't heard, over my 87 years. So, deal. I don't know if he'd gotten close to my car, what I would have happened. I like my car. But that having been said, in a macro sense, I've had nothing but good things happen here. I followed ownership in the restaurant. As I said earlier, it was owned by a black couple, Ernie and Royal, who incidentally have a sculpture down on Merchants Road, which is the main street, the really main street in Rutland. The town did a sculpture to him and Willa Royal, his wife. Beautiful carved stone sculpture. But I bought his restaurant, and the acceptance was very, very positive. When I ran my search practice out of here, I did business with many of the CEOs of the larger companies in Vermont, and I think I got accepted just like anybody else. And I've had nothing but good times here, so that's why I love it. The air is fresher than it is in most places. People still say hello in a lot of instances. People still smile, and you can still drive and not spend hours in traffic. And you get to know your neighbors, and you get to know a lot of folks here that you would not get to know if you lived in New York, where I most immediately came from. So yeah, love Vermont.
That's great.
Well, and
Go ahead.
and Al has been very well accepted, as he said, and he served on a number of state boards and also some of our public communications entities, etc. I've had much of the same experience, maybe not always at that level, but I've served as a justice of the peace. I've served as a school board. I'm on the planning commission. Al and I both work with the Rutland City Police Department has a subdivision, for lack of a better word, or a wing called Project Vision, which is a community-based, trying to build trust and between the community and the police department. And Al's been very active in that. So it's been wonderful to me, and I just wanted to keep going. And I guess we'll shift into the economics, but we need people, and the people who come aren't going to be like the people who came in the 1960s with the hippie movement. And we'll go into more of that later, I assume.
Well, you should know that this broadcast will also go to people outside the state, and I'm hoping what you've shared might encourage them to consider Vermont as a place to stay and live. I'm also wondering if there might be another avenue you might take in presenting the Declaration to towns. You've mostly focused, as you should, on select boards and the civic leaders of the community. But the Declaration also has spiritual and moral implications to it as well. And I'm wondering if you might, or if another iteration of this presentation might find its way in faith communities, in churches, synagogues, within small towns, that might even serve as a setting for extended conversations, and especially those communities where the Declaration has not been well received. The church or this faith community, could be a synagogue or what have you, might serve as an impetus for continued conversation and seeing where people might voice their opinions.
I think you're right. What we've done so far is we've had wonderful, wonderful support by a group called Vermont Interfaith Action.
Ah, yes.
And they have pointed us to people in the areas where we don't have contacts, or even somewhere we do, that helped. And often that's clergy. And it's very helpful for them to join us in our effort. Um, some don't want to get involved, but most have. And it's been a very, very positive experience. Um, we encourage also, once a town is adopted, that they solicit the ongoing support of clergy of all faiths to help so-called spread the word, spread the value, spread the moral necessity of treating all people fairly. So, we have done it, and I'm sure Al will have more to say.
It's been
Great.
instrumental. We have something we call local champions, and those are people who have volunteered, and we work with to help get the declaration adopted and then implemented. And VIA has been very, very active, as Norman said, in that regard. They're all clergy from various religions. It's a statewide organization, but it's also important to say that the six of us now we've not done this anywhere near alone. The Vermont Chamber of Commerce was kind of the first established organization to give us outright support. They furnished the website, which at vtdeclarationofinclusion.org right now, that we've used for almost 4 years. So they suggested it, and then they implemented it, and they manage it for us day in and day out. The Vermont League of Cities and Towns under Ted Brady endorsed this effort, and they have, they are a resource for us to go to when we need information that is either legal in essence, or that we need them to furnish to towns to give towns some guidance on this whole issue of inclusion, diversity, et cetera. The Vermont Rural Development Group has also been a supporter, and the Social Equity Caucus, which now inactive, has been very, very active, along with the NACP. So all of those organizations have supported us. They've provided us with names of people that will help us move towns to adoption and therefore implementation. This whole effort works so much better, Arnold, when there are local people involved, when local people carry the water. That happened in as I mentioned earlier in this talk, Windham County. A local person gathered up a group of people and they carried it forward. I was involved at the very beginning, and it was frustrated because not very much happened. And then boom, local people got involved and on their own carried this forward. The town of Charlotte, which just adopted about 3 months ago, so had very, very active local people. After the select board was very, very reticent to move forward on this thing, the town got together under the leadership of 2 or 3 people and overwhelmingly adopted the Declaration of Inclusion. So, yeah, we've tapped on some of those local resources. The clergy, once again, being a part of that group of people.
Yeah, I would just like to add a word about the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. They were on this from the beginning, and I still remember the Zoom meeting we had with them, in which they parsed every single word of the direct Declaration of Inclusion with us. And as we read it, they went over it, then it went to their council. He reviewed it, because a lot of towns are necessarily concerned with what it will cost. Mm-hmm. And were they committed to it? Was it legally enforceable? So that if they adopted, they were exposed to expenses that they saw or felt they couldn't afford. And they came down with an opinion, which we've passed on many, many times, that was not the case. And it's been very, very helpful. And for some reason, that meeting, which was about 4 years ago, still stands out in my mind. And particularly some of the work comments of the executive director, Ted Brady. So they have been a very, very great ally. And just to follow up a word on the chamber, I'm the one that's responsible for communicating with the chamber on the statistics that we keep. And they have somebody that does that, and they are just, you call those and go, the emails are answered almost before I push the button to send it. And they put up the totals and change the various places with every town and every statistic we give them, and they've just been wonderful.
That's
I think,
great.
Arnold,
Go
going
ahead.
forward, things are going to get trickier because of what's happening in Washington and the present administration being vindictive in some instances and just being overly aggressive in defunding towns, cities, educational institutions, et cetera, which have DEI policies. And so, you know, the remaining 85 towns that we go to, I wouldn't expect this to be as easy, if you will, as it has been. So that VLCT is really taking a look at the language to make sure that towns aren't exposed, have any legal liability and therefore some costs because of adopting and/or implementing the Declaration of Inclusion. So it's in a state of flux.
Yeah.
We're aware of that, and we'll see what happens.
Well, my thoughts and prayers and positive vibes go with you as you continue this effort. There is an organization in Vermont, I think it's called the 240-something Club, and considering the kind of contacts that you have had in trying to promote the Declaration of Inclusion to all the towns in the Vermont, you may be eligible for membership in that club. So good luck to you. I want to thank you, Norm and Al, for being a part of this session of the Talk Vermont, for making yourself available, and also for the enormous work that you have done in promoting the Declaration of Inclusion. Again, my thoughts and prayers are with you as you continue these efforts. It has done much in helping to make Vermont a more hospitable place. So thank you for joining us this evening. And for those of you who wish to stay involved with the Talk Vermont, our next session will involve Reverend Mark Hughes, who is the founder and head of Vermont Racial Justice Alliance. And after that, we're hoping to have a conversation with members of Loving Day Vermont, which is an organization of interracial families living in the state. Loving Day is based on the Supreme Court decision, I think it was back in 1969, that in behalf of the family whose last name was Loving, for the end of laws that discriminated against interracial marriages. So we're going to have them also here and just ask questions and get their experiences as to what it's like to be an interracial family and interracial couples in this state. So we're hoping that you'll continue to be a part of this program, and we thank you for your participation. In the meantime, be well, be kind, and be blessed. Thank you for joining us.
Let's talk about our hopes and dreams beyond the reach it seems. Let's talk. Confess I live in hell. I failed to fall this game. Maybe we can find a pathway forward or a clue. So we may together be a symbiotic harmony where I can talk to you, you can talk to me. Let's talk. Let's talk. Let's talk, let's talk, let's talk.